Hello and welcome to the show. I am your host, Terry Ann Russell of the Healing Heart Initiative. I am thrilled to be your guide on this transformative journey. Today, my guest is my good friend, Rachel. Rachel Pearson is a professional evidential medium and the author of Start It Up. She also hosts her own podcast called Get Spirited. Get Spirited. Welcome to the show, Rachel.
Thank you, Terry, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. I want to start by delving right in because I know we have a lot to cover and we'll see how long it goes and what we can get into. But a lot of the work that I do has to do with the heart and the heart healing and the transformative journey of healing the heart. So a lot of my clients in the beginning of my journey came to me with a blocked heart chakra. And it was no coincidence. That's exactly what I had been working through all those years prior. So I want to talk to you a little bit about losing Perry after losing him. And I want you to share a little bit about how the heart played that pivotal role in your journey.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And in the beginning of my journey, after he died in July of 2015, I wouldn't even have had these words to describe. Like, heart chakra was not even a term that was in my vocabulary. I just knew I felt like my heart had been ripped out of my body, right? Like, it was so intense. And then as time went on and my healing journey and awareness developed, I in those first couple of years began doing healing meditations for myself and also receiving energy work, spiritual healing through energy workers. Um, where I released a lot. And I don't think it's a coincidence. Just 2 days ago, I was just sharing this with a group of about the heart chakra and how early on in grief, it's common to be constantly releasing because that was my experience anyway, that I
Right.
felt like I was constantly heavy. And sometimes even when I started getting a little bit lighter and kind of moving forward a little bit in life, I would do a self-healing or have healing and go, oh, there's more here to release. Like it felt like ongoing, like continuous. Um, and now that's not the case. Now I know something's up, right? But it's been like 9 years for me. So the heart chakra and the healing was probably the most, definitely the most obvious to me what was happening as far as what had been injured, if you will. I'm not sure if this is more your specialty, the terminology here, right? Or what needed to be healed.
Yeah, exactly. So the heart, you described it perfectly. I felt like my heart was ripped out of my chest after Anthony died. And there was such a heaviness. And I was very surprised at that time at the physicality of it.
Mm.
I had experienced loss of my grandparents and it was very emotional, but nothing to the physical extent that I experienced with Anthony. And so a lot of the work that I've come to understand and do is that the heart also holds its own brain, its own frequency. And when that pain, and it's such a devastating pain, right? It's your child and your heart's ripped out of your chest, that your heart goes through this complete and utter shutdown. And it feels like physically there's somebody sitting on your chest. So yeah, I believe it is injured. And it takes a while. I like that you talked about self-healing and stuff. That's something that was very pivotal in my journey. Just help get rid of some of that heaviness that I would continually feel. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I love that you use the term physicality because that was my experience too, where as someone who hadn't previously experienced panic or anxiety attacks, I also remember feeling like I couldn't breathe. Maybe
Yes.
that had to do with that heart crushing, that anxiety, right? Like now that I think about it, reflect upon that, I remember just feeling like I couldn't get air. Like for
Yes.
weeks, especially, it was very intense where all day throughout the day, I was like, always like taking a deep breath and trying to catch my breath.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a transformative journey and it's different for everybody. And I always share that, like what we share and what we talk about, it can be different for you. Maybe you don't have as much as the physical experience as we may have had, but everybody's so different and unique that's really what I try to impress upon people who come in and want to talk about their loss, because it's not the same for everybody. Everybody doesn't grieve the same. And so it depends on where you are in your journey, right? Often I talk about the beauty that comes from pain. And this was something that my son told me early on that I did not believe, because I couldn't believe that any beauty would come out of all of this pain that I was going through.
Right.
But grief is such a journey, right? And moving through these feelings of love and loss. Can you share a little bit about what you feel is the beauty that came from your pain at that time?
Yeah, gosh, there's so much. I believe early on, Terry, I remember becoming aware of this like heightened empathy I had for other people who had lost children physically, right? Like I remember we had friends whose the coworker that my husband worked with and his wife, their little 8-year-old daughter had passed a year or two before Perry in a car accident. And I remember like trying to hold space for them and be there for them. And there were so many things that I just couldn't have understood as empathetic as I was until I had experienced it myself. You know, I remember
Yeah.
thinking with them, like, well, at least they're going to have this love surrounding them all the time. And at least they're going to have people who are always going to be checking in on them. But what I didn't realize until I experienced it is how people sometimes are afraid and don't know what to say. And you can actually, it can distance people from you, which isn't, that's not part of the beauty of it. But the beauty coming from this heightened empathy that I had, like, oh, wow, I never would have guessed this. I never would have known this, and now I know how to hold space for people better, right?
Mhm.
And then there came like what I call the magical part of it, the very surreal part of like, you know, Perry coming to me and bringing other kids to me who I would meet, and these details, and I didn't know what they meant, and that kind of helped me develop as an evidential medium. So that obviously like the biggest and most prominent part of my life today, but I think it's just as important to reflect upon it for me anyway, that empathy for others and to be able to hold space for other people, and just help other people that are going through pain, regardless of what they're going through that experience too.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. You know, empathy and compassion. It was
Yeah.
something I felt that I had compassion for before, but afterwards, after such a loss, I had such a deepening compassion for others. Like it had always been something I was drawn to even as a child, right? I was always the helper. I always wanted to help the underdog. And, it like tripled after Anthony died, that level of compassion and empathy that I would feel for others.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful. Your journey is definitely a testament of faith and strength. It takes a strong person to walk through this experience, wouldn't you say?
Yes, and likewise to you, my friend. Yeah. Yeah,
Thank you.
for sure. And I
Many of
believe
our
that spirit
listen.
gives us strength too. Sorry.
Oh, absolutely. Because,
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
it, I said that many times that, without the connection that I had, because I really, even before he passed, didn't understand that connection. Like I could sense spirit from when I was little, and I turned it off for a long time. I didn't like knowing things about people when I was younger. I didn't like being able to foresee the future, if you will. So I sort of blocked all of that.
Sure.
And, eventually it's going to come in and it's going to do its magic so that you can do the work that you need to do while you're here. Um,
Yeah.
so many of our listeners are experiencing their own form of loss right now. A lot of my clients, as I said earlier, have this aching heart space. And it's not always necessarily because of a physical loss. A lot of that's going on in our crazy world today. People are experiencing a lot of loss of connection, a loss of oneness, a loss of just this beautiful intertwined relationship that we hold with everybody, right?
Sure.
So, what can you offer in the form of words for those struggling to see the possibility of either healing or transforming through the pain that they're going through, the struggles, the obstacles they're facing now?
Oh, that's a powerful question. I'm going to tune in a little bit. I feel like staying present is what is coming to mind. Just staying present and trying not to project into the future. As you refer to, Terry, I feel like there's so much anxiety and separation now. And it can be too easy for us to add to that or to have our own experience of that by kind of dwelling on that or projecting it, right?
Hmm.
So I feel like the more we can just breathe, take a moment, send a thought to spirit, to our angels, guides, and loved ones to help us center, to help us stay present so that we don't get lost in that. I
Yeah.
feel like the fear and the anxiety and the disconnect can cause us to become uncentered and to get lost in that and to get in our heads, and then it's just a spiral sometimes, right?
Yes.
um and so, like, to bring ourselves back and remember that we have tools, we things that we can do. Maybe it's physical movement, getting into our bodies, or maybe it is calling upon our angels for a little mini miracle to help us, to give us a sign, to get us some sort of connection that will bring us to our present.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you. It's funny because, growing up the way that I did in an Italian, family, everybody was always very masculine about doing, 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 right? And it took me a long time to learn that just being in that space of being present, quieting my mind. I didn't always have to be doing something. If you weren't doing something, you were lazy, right? So those preconceived beliefs, thoughts, patterns, they all play a role in who we are today. And it's funny when you said that being present, I think that's so important for people to understand is the ability to be present because our body is reacting even before our mind is kicking in with all this stuff, right? So I always use the example of remember when you were younger and you'd go to work, like I worked 9 to 5 corporate, and you'd go to work and somebody be in a bad mood, and then your mood starts switching and changing, and so you're picking up on the energy, the vibe that they're carrying.
Contagious.
And that's what's playing out today, right?
Hmm.
A lot of that today is that heaviness, that angst, that stress that people are feeling. And you can see it everywhere you go, in the grocery store, on the highways, in the schools. It's very present. So learning to become more present and being in that peacefulness, that quietness in your own space, I think is really crucial for others.
Yeah, you brought up such a good point, Terry, about that. That it is contagious, really. And it's like we don't have to share the same beliefs or thoughts, but that energy is contagious, right? And then
Yeah.
then you're anxious about something of your own, and then it just kind of can grow from there. We've all had that experience, I'm sure.
Or you walk into a room after somebody's had a fight
Oh
and that
gosh.
they haven't said anything, you weren't there, you don't know what's going on, but the tension is thick, right?
Yeah, you can feel it in the air, right? It's like the air's thick.
Yes. And because I'm very empathic, and I feel things pretty intensely.
Yeah,
I was always aware of this, even as a child. So for me, I learned early on how to like read the room of energy. Like, was there something going on here previously? Like, how do I need to react now? Um,
sure. Sure. I've read a lot about that topic, Terry, recently, and about that, and kind of related to trauma or past experiences of how sometimes that's connected to how we develop our empathy, right? And this heightened sense of empathy is really like how, like you said, how do I need to be in the world? I need to know what's going on or what has gone on here. Yeah, so fascinating how that develops.
Yeah, and I believe all of our experiences shape us, right? They bring
Yeah,
us to who we are. Even the experience of losing a child, which is so painful. And my journey's a little less than yours. It's been about almost 6 years for me. And so I look back on it, and a lot of what I share is, where I am at now versus
yeah,
where I was then, and probably where I'll end up being because the journey I don't believe is ever ending, right? There's
right.
days that I probably go through life and everything's great and I'm enjoying my life, right? But then it hits, and it's the sense that he's not here. He's not here for his brothers. He's not here for his sisters. And I feel that loss so impactfully, more so for them than me. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah,
Yeah, can you share a
absolutely.
little bit about
Yeah, I feel that
how your
too.
kids?
Well, very natural thing. This no coincidence just happened last night. And like you, it can hit out of the blue or unexpectedly. And there's a TV show that Craig and I started watching called No Good Deed.
Hmm.
Have you heard of this or seen it?
No, I haven't seen it.
I didn't know anything about the plot, but the premise is, excuse me, um, is based on this couple whose son died in their house and they're selling their house. And we thought it was just a dark comedy, didn't realize any of that. And it was kind of dark and twisted. A lot of satire in it, but the last, it's like a limited series, and we watched like the last couple episodes that which were extremely touching. And Craig and I were both crying. And the sibling who came in, their daughter hadn't been in the show up until this final episodes, and that their reunion with her and all of that, and I was just like bawling like a baby, and then they would have show these memories of their son and from the daughter's perspective too. And as a mom, that got me more than like the other episodes previously. It just,
Yeah.
yeah, and Craig too. It was very touching. So I feel that way. I feel like it's just I don't know, maybe in our DNA as moms, or that I feel. And I used to say this even early on in my grief journey, even when my grief was more intense, that that's the hardest for me is when my kids were mourning, you know,
Yeah.
and they it's interesting because like Perry was our oldest. And so there were times like mile markers that kind of hit me unexpectedly too. And I didn't realize like my daughter, she knew too. She knew the days, like she knew the day. I was thinking the year, like when she would turn older than her older brother, but she was like, today I'm older than Perry. It was just
Mm.
sometimes it wasn't always like heart-wrenching thing, but more of a surreal, like melancholy, like
Yeah.
how can this be, right? Even though of course I know that he's close by in spirit and he's
Hmm.
good and he's not dead, but the physical, like that physical connection is always going to be something that I miss, you know?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and then too, it was really hard for me when our youngest became older than him because Perry was 17 and now our youngest, just for listeners, is 21. So it's been,
Yeah.
there've been times along the way that have taken me by surprise, like the grief, but then there's also like watching the TV show last night, those unexpected moments that brought that up. And I will say, Terry, where I'm at now, sometimes this might sound odd, like it might feel good to cry. Do you know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
Early on, it scared me when I would hear people say, my tears are a sign of my love and I never want to forget them. And I would be like, F that. I'm not gonna, I don't want to get stuck. And I had a misconception that these people that would say that might be stuck in their grief.
Hmm.
But now that like grief is kind of in the back seat of my life, I almost like, I don't mind when that happens unexpectedly. Because it's like, of
Yeah.
course I'm going to miss him. I think I'm more sad now at the thought that I could go through the rest of my life and not miss him. That would be sad,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
And I think, there's this misconception that grief is something to get over. Like, why aren't
oh,
you over it yet? Why aren't you through? Why haven't you moved forward, moved on? And I don't
yeah.
think that it's something to get over. Like, I always say that I will never be the same person that I was before Anthony passed. And
No.
that sometimes is sad, but sometimes it's really happy for me because I
Yeah.
don't want to be the same person that I was. I've
Yeah.
learned so much through the experience and I've grown so much and I'm able to share so much more authentically, right? Through the experience. So,
Yeah. Isn't it interesting how you can go through the most devastating pain and then get to a place? I feel the same way. Like, I like who I am now more than I did before. I lost a lot of fear. I lost the fear of death. I lost of an anxiety and my need to control and feel
mhm.
like I could make things perfect for my kids, which was just an illusion anyway. Like,
Right.
right? Like, and it's interesting it's such a paradox to me to have experienced that devastating grief that I wouldn't want anybody to go through. And at the same time, I feel better within myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I like myself better. I don't know, just what grief has taught me. And I guess that's like you refer to, like the beauty that comes from it. But like you, Terry, I don't like the terms move on or get over it. I always say I move forward with him,
Yeah.
because it's like I always wanted to allow myself to to have joy again. I didn't want to get stuck and feeling guilty over enjoying life again. But at the same time, so move forward to me sounds it felt good, but I never move on.
No, I don't
You
think that you
know,
can. Early on, even knowing what I knew, Anthony would say, I'd say, I can't believe you're dead. And he'd say, I'm not dead. And I was like, I was so frustrated because we would argue back and forth. And I was like, I can't believe you're not here physically, because you can't argue with that, right? You're not here physically.
right,
And then he could
right.
sort of say, because he wanted me to understand, yes, I understood there was no death, but physically you're not here. And physically, for a mother now not to have her child in the physical, for me was really
Yeah,
painful in the beginning, to just
same.
have that, like, because your other children, you could pick up the phone and call them, or my one son lived close by, so it's different now. You're not here in the physical. That was a huge adjustment, even though I could hear him all the time. And people say, you're so lucky you can hear him all the time. I
It's
didn't
not the
feel very
same.
lucky in the beginning.
No, no. And the physical part, Terry, that's such a good point because I'm very touchy-feely and I still am with my kids. I'm very attached to the physical. Like,
Mhm.
I'm always like hugging them and touching them. And so, yeah, it's not the same. It's not the same, and it's not supposed to be, right? We're
Right.
supposed to grieve and feel. I feel like we're supposed to feel all the emotions with that, and let it teach us, right? To let it change us and transform us is probably a better word.
Yeah.
And get the beauty to the beauty part, but it's not something like we can fast forward to, and it's not a linear journey either.
Right. So can you share a little bit about when you're connecting with your clients, loved ones in spirit? Um, what most of the time are clients coming to you looking for? Are they looking for answers as to what happened? Maybe they don't know what happened. Or are they looking for just confirmation that there is an afterlife? Is there something after this? And is my child, my loved one, okay?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I would say both, right? Like, there's sometimes people do need answers or want answers. Sometimes there's they have closure over that aspect, right? Like there's no questions, I should say, over their passing, and what they're looking for is just more validation that they're alive and well and with them, right? And I find what spirit will bring through are those validations that they're alive and well. I just did a reading with a lady, and it was her grandfather brought through towards the end of our reading. I'm like, he's with a rabbit. I don't know why, and he's with a rabbit, and he showed me a carrot, and he was feeding me a carrot, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, my grandpa had a pet rabbit," and it was such an odd thing, an unusual thing for an older gentleman to have a pet rabbit, right?
Right.
Like, but it's sometimes. So I would say it's not like that's not the big insightful thing, but it is the big thing sometimes, that validation, right? It's
Right.
like it's those little things that are the big deal, I find most of the time, that really open up the client's heart to understanding and accepting that they are alive and well and really with them. So it can be those little fun validations. And it also, I find too, that spirit brings those validations through so the person will receive their deeper messages, maybe the goodbye they didn't get to say, or the I'm sorry they didn't get to say here, because that's truly what's important to spirit. Those or the higher messages about what their heaven is like, or who they're reunited with, and how they're helping guide them here in their life. Of
Right.
course, is what's important to the person in spirit.
No, I would agree for sure, starting with those small things. Like if somebody would come to me, if I were to go to a medium and they'd say, your son loved pizza, or he cursed a lot, I would know that was my son, right?
Yeah,
So that gives me confirmation that that's my son. But then those deeper meanings and those deeper messages, and often it is for the client, right? They want
yeah,
their loved one that's still here to be happy. They want
yeah,
them to be able to live a happy and fulfilled life, even though they're not in the physical with them. So often what they bring through also is things that they can do, right? Maybe
yeah.
it is doing a yoga class, or going to a therapist, whatever it is. I find that spirit tries to help their loved one too.
Yeah, yeah. Terry, exactly. I love that you said that because we play pickleball together. I recently had a
We
reading where
do.
somebody was like trying to give their mom suggestions on like what to do that's going to help them, move the energy and feel better. And I got a reference for pickleball, and I'm like, this might be tennis or ping pong for you, but I play pickleball now. So you're right. Those things that they can do, yoga comes through a lot. Meditation, energy work, the kind of healing you offer your clients,
Mhm,
the
mhm.
kind of healing that we both have received from light workers. Yeah. Sometimes it's drinking water and moving our bodies and taking a walk, getting fresh air, those things that we often neglect when we're really mourning or just going
Yeah,
through difficult times in life.
absolutely. So finally, can you share as an experienced medium, after a mediumship session or a guidance session that you offer, how you feel? For me, when I work with clients and I'm offering healing or guidance, I feel this immense gratitude for the gifts that I've been able
Yes.
to share with others. And, so often people say, don't you feel drained after doing this work? Yeah, I mean, if you overextend yourself, you will feel drained, you will get sick. There's a lot of things, but if you do it the right way, which is sharing bits and pieces and not overextending yourself, I find that what comes through, it's almost as if I feel like I can run a marathon after, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I love that you feel the same way because I have the same experience, and people, the same thing, I think, assume that I'm drained from it. I think it's important to be like in a flow state going into it because, as you said, if it's just coming, I like the way you describe that, just staying with the flow and not trying of my own might to give, right? That takes time and experience. It took time and experience for me the first couple years. I would be more likely to overextend myself, but yeah, for I would say 95% of the time, I do. I leave feeling uplifted
Mhm.
myself and grateful, like you said. I miss it when I haven't done it in a few days when I'm on vacation or just had off. I feel like I get too in my head and too earthly minded. So for me, it actually personally uplifts me. And then there is that instant, gratitude. And I want to say instant gratification almost afterwards, where I feel like I'm on cloud nine a little bit. So it really
Mhm.
gives me upliftment for the rest of my day.
Yes. Yeah, it puts you in a space of just as if you were to meditate, right? Just as if you were to connect
Mhm.
with source. I mean, whatever you want to call it. I think being in that space is just so beneficial. I would spend all day in the ethers, but for me, I've got to find that balance in my life. So for me, it's more about the balancing the physical and the spiritual. But I want to thank you for joining us today. And I want you to remember that healing is a journey, and be gentle with yourself because nobody's journey is the same. We've all had different experiences and obstacles and challenges to face. And so, what we share, if it resonates with you, take it and run with it and live your best life that you can live through this experience we've been given. So, thank you for joining us, and I'll see you next week.
Bye.